Now on ABC 7 News at 7, we continue to follow our breaking news tonight. Officials have confirmed the remains found at Myakkahatchee yesterday are in fact those remains of Brian Laundrie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Narisa Lamison. According to dental records, a comparison of dental records confirmed that it is Brian. Those human remains are of Brian Laundrie. This discovery came after 33 days of searching for Brian. This all happening after Brian's parents went in with the police to investigate yesterday morning. Our Daniela Hurtado is live from the park. Daniela, how did they determine these remains were actually his?
Well, you hit it right on the nail right at the beginning, those dental records. That's how they were able to solidify this match. Now, we really didn't think we were going to get an ID so soon because we asked the medical examiner's office earlier today, the medical examiner, the chief medical examiner who was in charge of this investigation earlier today, whether or not they believed they were going to be able to identify and process those remains at some point today. And they told us it was going to take several days. So what we know right now from the FBI is that through dental records collected, they were able to match 23-year-old Brian Laundrie to the remains that were found here at the Sarasota County Reserve at the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. Now, something else we can tell you, I know you talked about the parents, Chris and Roberta. Yes, they were here yesterday, just a day after the park finally opened after more than a month to the public. And the FBI and, of course, the Northport Police Department did meet with Brian's parents here yesterday morning. And the attorney that represents Chris and Roberta, Stephen Bertolino, also told us that he told us yesterday, actually, that the reason that law enforcement ended up coming with them was because he did notify them the night that the reserve opened back up. So that would be Tuesday night, that they had plans to go to the reserve come morning. So all of them were searching. They found that book bag and that notebook that we told you about yesterday that belonged to Brian Laundrie near these human remains. Right now, we don't know if anything was inside the book bag. We don't know if they found anything in the notebook. And right now, all we know is that those human remains have been identified as Brian Laundrie. Same Brian Laundrie that has been reported missing since September 17th, last seen since September 13th when he went right here into the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park with his Mustang and wasn't seen since. Reporting live in Northport, Daniela Hurtado, ABC 7, your local station.
All right, thank you, Daniela, for that detailed report. I'm sure we'll be talking to you later. We also have our very own Rick Adams down in Northport. And this is where Brian Laundrie's parents live. Rick, we know there have been people outside that home for days, over a month. What is the mood right now?
Narisa, good evening. We have seen people here sporadically, and they finally have some answers. And now with those answers, we may actually see some more people coming out here. Chris and Roberta Laundrie have remained quiet all day long. We don't expect that to change anytime soon. All the talking is coming from their attorney. Despite the circumstances, the Laundries are now grieving the loss of their son.
The coincidence is a little bit uncanny. We've been following the story quite a bit, so it's hard to put how that happened right like that. We're thankful that something has been found with all the time that's been put in, and sad at the same time for their family as well.
And we will certainly continue to monitor the situation out here outside of the Laundrie home. If there are any other developments, any new developments, we will certainly pass that along to you both on air and online. In the meantime, reporting live from Northport this evening, I'm Rick Adams, ABC 7, your local station.
Thank you so much for your coverage. And right now we are bringing in our law enforcement expert, Steve Moyer. And Steve Moyer is here to break it all down for us, to process this. He's the former deputy chief of the Sarasota Police Department, also a former lieutenant colonel with the Maryland State Police, and a graduate, we must say, of Towson University. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, what a difference a day makes. We weren't expecting to get this ID on the remains so soon. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And, again, thanks for having me on. Let's go back 4 or 5 weeks ago, 33 days. You had me on because a friend of mine, Jerry Torres, was the first to put the reward money out there, and then others started to do that, which generated more interest in the case. 48 hours ago, it looked like all the leads had run cold, But as I say, police work's methodical. They follow the information. The last thing they knew is that's the last place where Brian was last seen, and that's where they found him.
So it's dental records. They made a comparison with the dental records, and they basically look at the dental records from the remains. And then so we know there's a skull because they looked at dental remains of the dental remains, and then they looked at the dental records. They are the same. So usually it takes 48 hours, you said, right? We were talking about that in the newsroom.
It's a forensic autopsy. All they found, were bones. And you got to remember there's a famous case out of Washington, D.C. It was Sharonda Levy, and she was missing for over a year. Her remains were found in Rock Creek Park, and they were able to identify her through dental records and through bones and DNA. So
here's the search for that. Chandra Levy back in 2001. For those of you who remember, or maybe who weren't around, this is a famous intern who allegedly had an affair with a congressman, went missing, was gone for a year. They finally found her remains in this park outside of Washington, D.C. So you're comparing it a lot to that.
And the thing to remember about that case, the congressman was the focus, and then 2 other women were found in that park, remains, and another subject was ultimately charged. But what we have here right now is that they're going through this methodical process. They announced today that it is Brian, and not a sense of relief for the Petito family, because I'm sure they're still upset about the whole incident. But what the police need to do now is to remain focused on continuing the investigation. They have to run down every single lead. If there's information out there where they may need to go interview other people, they need to do it. So if anybody has information, we still want them to call 1-800-CALL-FBI.
Speaking of the family, there's no Gabby now. Now we know there's no Brian. This investigation is going to continue, and I have to ask, a lot of focus is going to be going to the parents and more detailed questions, right? Because they have been talked to this whole time. But what are the questions now? Now that the remains have been found, the only person of interest is dead. So now they're going to be talking to the parents in more detail. Can you speak to that? Yeah,
they'll talk to the parents in more detail, and they'll definitely track back to make sure that there was no false information given to the FBI or the Northport Police Department or the Sheriff's Office. The FBI has the lead, so if any false information was given, they could face additional charges. But for now, the focus is going to be, what did they find there? There was a backpack, there was a notepad. I'm sure they're comparing all that information against all the other leads to see if there's any connection. They're probably also looking at the crime scene, because I mentioned yesterday, something as small as a cigarette butt, can add additional information about that particular location.
I was going to ask you, how long is it going to take before we can find out, or can we find out, because we're only talking about human remains. Can they find out how he died from those human remains that have been out there for so long, allegedly underwater for so long? How will that work?
Oh, there's multiple cases across the country. What they'll do is they'll do a thorough examination. If there was any type of trauma to the bones or the body, they'll be able to determine that through the autopsy.
It's amazing what forensics can do, right?
Absolutely.
It's like magic. Okay, what about the backpack and the notebook? I want to talk a little bit more about that. That has also suffered in the environment. I mean, I imagine if anything was written in the notebook, it's probably washed away.
No, I'm sure they'll look at everything that's in there. The bag, at least the picture that was on the national news, the bag looked fairly large. And they obtained the information immediately, and I'm sure they're looking through it right now.
A lot of parents talking about, I know that on Twitter, there are a lot of, people voicing their opinions, this whole time voicing their opinions. A lot of people wondering about the timing of the parents being at Myakkahatchee Park when what is the coincidence there that they were there when the remains were found?
Yeah, I live here locally. We've seen it every day. There's people that have been protesting in front of their residence every day. They've been unable to go anywhere without somebody following them. Even when they went to the park when it opened yesterday, they called the Northport Police, they called the FBI, and they met them there. And there's a lot of video of them walking into that park, so I think they went to the place where they thought he was, and they were able to find the remains.
It's just kind of weird timing, but I guess that's
right,
just what happens.
And then I'll get back to what I've said throughout this whole investigation, it's just the facts. You got to go with just the facts.
That's right.
You got to ignore the speculation on Twitter, social media, Facebook, because everyone's going to have their own opinion. And
we've heard much of it.
Oh my! And what the police are acting on, what the FBI is acting on, is solely fact.
All right. And what happens now? Because it's shifting. The focus is shifting. This whole investigation shifting. What happens now? What can we expect to see in the next day, weeks to come?
They'll finish the autopsy to try and determine the cause of death for Brian, much like they did with Gabby. More than most likely, the remains will be held for a period of time, but they need to chase down every single lead to determine and try to determine what happened here. There was a lot of criticism of the police departments here.
Let's bring that up. I was going to say you have an opinion on what people have to say about law enforcement and how they handled.
Right. I worked in Maryland. I've been in law enforcement for 38 years, or public safety work. State police 24. I was a deputy chief here just under 3 years. And there's one thing I can say about the professionalism of the police departments here. Chief Garrison down in Northport is a professional friend and a personal friend. He and his team are committed to making sure they do the right job. Kurt Hoffman, amazing sheriff, took Tom Knight's place. When you look at the credibility of those two sheriffs and their department and what they've been able to do here in Sarasota County, it's amazing. I've worked several cases with the FBI. We had troopers killed where the FBI took the lead. I have a great deal of respect for the FBI. And like I said yesterday, they did a press briefing yesterday, not a press conference, because they just wanted to come out and state, this is what we found. And it wasn't a back and forth question with the media.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Steve Moyer, for your perspective and your contribution to our coverage. And we really appreciate your expertise. And we will be right back.